Hello, you're listening to People-Powered News from WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM. I'm Allison Durham.
And I'm Larry McGlynn, and we bring you these updates in a new journalism collaboration with our Resolve Philly partners and community radio stations in Philadelphia. Each week, we will provide news and information regarding city and state government updates, social movements, public health information, and stories from local people in our community. We are reporting from PhillyCam's community radio station, WPPM, for all of our People-Powered News Network affiliates.
This week, People-Powered News brings you an interview with Councilmember Maria Quiñones-Sanchez. People-Powered News also covers this week's anti-violence press conference regarding upcoming ballot questions. And for the Scrap Radio Project, WRGU 92.9 FM's Matt Berg presents a collection of interviews by Christopher Cannito, highlighting the work of Germantown residents who are operating small nonprofits and participating in activism in response to COVID-19.
Here are some of this week's headlines, starting with global and local virus case counts and deaths. Worldwide, there are 40,635,759 cases and 1,121,574 deaths. In the United States, there are 8,258,568 cases and 220,824 deaths. In Pennsylvania, there are 177,409 cases and 8,533 deaths. In Philadelphia, there are 41,094 cases and 1,849 deaths. In New Jersey, there are 222,193 cases and 14,438 deaths. In New York State, there are 486,480 cases and 25,672 deaths. And in New York City, there are 249,335 cases and 19,292 deaths. Mayor Jim Keddy held his weekly COVID-19 briefing earlier today, at which City Health Commissioner Dr. Thomas Farley announced weekly COVID-related information, as well as an ominous warning regarding the state of disease spread.
Looks like we're missing that the first clip with Farley, but let's move on to the next one and we'll bring it right back up.
Dr. Farley said that every zip code in the city had seen an uptick in cases, and contact tracing was providing information regarding spread.
Our information from case interviews as part of our contact tracing, showing that the spread is occurring within households and in social gatherings. That's family gatherings, it's people visiting each other's houses, it's weddings, it's bridal showers. The case interviews, though, were also showing an increasing percentage of the cases who reported that they were working in an office during the time period when they were exposed. 17% of our cases that we interviewed reported that in the week of October 11th, versus about 7 or 9% during the weeks in September. And with that, we've had some individual circumstances where the spread appears to have occurred between coworkers who got together at lunch and were not wearing masks when they were doing that. So it's just a reminder that any setting indoors, people are close together, not wearing masks, such as the time when they get together at lunch, it's going to be a high-risk setting. And so workplaces is something we're concerned about right now.
Farley also announced the opening of the COVID relief unit in an undisclosed local nursing home.
This is a specialized nursing home set aside to care for nursing home patients who are COVID positive, who have tested positive for COVID, who have been in nursing homes where the nursing homes cannot safely care for them within their main facility. So if that nursing home, for example, can't have a separate wing where the COVID positive residents stay to keep them separate from the negative residents, then they can have them transferred to this COVID relief unit.
Dr. Farley also reported on mask use.
We have been doing observations of people using security cameras to see how many Philadelphia residents are wearing masks. had a variety of technical problems over the past few weeks getting those observations done, but we are doing them now. We're getting the data back in again. As of the week that started October 11th, 80% of people that were leaving retail stores were wearing masks. Now that's good at 80%, but it's not good enough. That means it's 20% were not wearing masks. That's still enough to have the spread of the coronavirus.
Dr. Farley also said we are seeing an uptick in virus spread regionally and nationally, and expressed concern regarding the spread of the disease.
We are seeing an increase in cases across the rest of the state of Pennsylvania, as well as in New Jersey. And in the US as a whole, case rates are clearly rising. At this point, they're not far from the peak that they saw in mid-July, which was the highest case count we had since the beginning of the epidemic. Now, mid-July, the states that had the highest case counts were in the South. Now, the states with the highest case counts and case rates are in the Midwest and in the Mountain West, the northern part of the central part of the country. But case rates are rising in nearly every state in the United States right now. So the overall message now is that the virus here in Philadelphia is spreading within households, it's spreading in family gatherings, it's spreading in social gatherings, and it may be spreading in workplaces. The risk is increasing now, maybe because of the colder weather, because of the drier air, because people are indoors more because of the colder weather, or maybe because people are becoming more complacent, or all those things combined. Whatever, though, it does appear that the virus is following the pattern of other respiratory viruses, like influenza. These viruses tend to get more common throughout the fall. They peak in January and February. If COVID follows that pattern, we're going to be having a difficult time for the next 3 to 4 months. So what should everyone do about that? First, let me remind people who can work from home should continue to do so. Concerned about the risk in offices, if you can work from home, do that so you can lower your risk. Then everyone, everywhere, needs to maintain wearing masks, keeping a distance from other people. You know, it's been now 7 months since the beginning of the epidemic, and everyone is tired of this virus. Unfortunately, the virus is not tired of us. Back in the spring, when the epidemic first hit, the mayor said, this is a virus that hunts humans. And the reality is, it's still hunting. We need to wear masks until we've vaccinated enough people that the virus has trouble finding people who don't already have antibodies. So everyone needs to wear masks, especially when they're around family, when they're around friends, when they're around coworkers, when they're around anyone else. More information on all the epidemic is on www.phila.gov/COVID. Thanks.
And in this clip, Dr. Farley announces weekly COVID-related case information, as well as an ominous warning regarding the state of disease spread.
We seem to be missing that clip as well, but it's all right. We'll move on to the next one.
Okay. Also in today's briefing, the mayor discussed the city's PHL Connect initiative.
I think we're experiencing some technical difficulties, but I'll let you know if we can keep you updated on that as well.
Okay. Last Thursday, Philadelphia City Council announced a major investment in affordable housing, poverty reduction, and job creation via the issuance of a $400 million municipal bond and a levying of a 1% construction tax, which is estimated to yield between $20 and $26 million per year. According to City Council, the proposed legislation and borrowing will impact the following areas: establishing the Housing Trust Fund, which receives revenue from special recording fees on mortgages and debts, issuing a $100 million bond to eliminate a basic systems repair backlog and provide low-interest home improvement loans through a 0.1% increase in the real estate transfer tax, securing a $20 million annual commitment to the Housing Trust Fund funded by property tax revenue from properties whose 10-year tax abatement has expired, and $10 million for commercial corridor cleaning and facade improvements. In addition, changes to the city's tax abatement will be pushed back a further 3 years, a hot button issue. Last week, City Council members held a press conference on a windy day in the 7th Council District, and I emphasize windy because you'll hear it in the recording a little bit. The 7th District is represented by Councilmember Maria Quiñones-Sanchez, and here's what she had to say regarding the plan.
And so what we're standing in, we're going to come back to this site in a couple of years, and you're going to see what transformation can happen and how a mixed income neighborhood, a diverse mixed income neighborhood will not happen unless government leads that. And that's what we're doing here today. We're stepping up to the plate, and we're going to invest not only in this community, but many communities like this throughout the city. And we're going to show Philadelphians that we heard them, that those protests, we heard you, and we're going to respond. And when things are tough is when we fight back. We don't retreat, but we lead in the direction that we need to so that people believe that they are electing leaders who are not afraid to do what is necessary. So I want to thank my council colleagues, Councilwoman Gilmore-Richardson, and my neighboring partner, Councilman Squilla, and all the rest of the council members who understand that this is a give and take. This is a give and take. We have an industry that wants to come in here and wants to invest. And we need them to invest in those communities. It is in their best interest. And the amount of money that this can generate becomes a win-win for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Next, we'll have Councilman Mark Squilla from the other side of town. Then we'll have Councilwoman Gilmore-Richardson. And then we will have also the host CDC, Nilda Ruiz, who's the president of APM.
Okay. And Council Majority Leader Sherelle Parker also spoke at the event, emphasizing the cities need to act on its own rather than wait for other forms of aid.
We can't sit by idly during this time and wait for someone to come to our rescue. And therefore, we must be proactive. This legislation will generate, as Councilman Squilla just mentioned, almost $500 million that will impact the lives of our most vulnerable residents who have been most hurt directly by COVID-19. It will help those in poverty to rise up out of it. And I don't want us to forget this, because this is a constituency that often gets left out of any narrative when it comes to addressing poverty. Those who are living on the margins. This will help them not fall further behind and help to create sustainable jobs and opportunities for those who need them most. So it is appropriate that we are standing here today on a proposed site for affordable housing. This site and locations like it across the city, they will rise more readily as a result of this legislation, and we must seize upon every opportunity to assist all city residents, but especially those who are the most vulnerable. This legislation, and I've been saying this today, Mr. President, I was just on a Zoom, which is why I'm late, with my constituents, letting them know that commercial quarter assistance will be included in this package. Support for small businesses, help to preserve home ownership in low-income neighborhoods and middle neighborhoods across the city of Philadelphia, help with neighborhood revitalization, permanent housing for the homeless, and eviction prevention. Sometimes elected officials become what we call expert AOPs. That is, we become expert articulators of the problem, but very rarely do we come up with solutions to address it. Council President Clark, Councilman Squilla, Councilwoman Sanchez, and Gilmore-Richardson, all of our colleagues, proud that we are proposing a solution that puts Philadelphia on a path to self-sufficiency. Thank you.
And this morning, we spoke with Councilmember Maria Quiñones-Sanchez about this legislation and its potential impacts. We went a little deeper with her this morning to talk about how this will work in the long run.
Okay, so prior to COVID, we had been working on the Poverty Action Plan,
We had a $400 million surplus, and it was really our expectation that we were going to be able to significantly invest in some efficient models to get to support people in poverty and move, the 100,000 people out of poverty. Obviously, COVID hit. We had to pivot. We had to juggle the budget, but with COVID, what we saw was there was even a greater need for us to double down on our commitment, right, to help move some folks from poverty and, prioritize some of this development, affordable housing, renters assist, all of the items we have been talking about prior to COVID. And, the construction tax is not new. It was a conversation we had as we were looking at our affordable housing portfolio and increasing opportunities. And so, we went back to it and said, with the industry requesting an extension of the abatement because of all the delays around COVID, and I facilitated what we called the development work group that included ZBA and water, streets, and planning around, our restart. What we saw was, even with all of the tremendous work by the departments, we were not going to be able to process all of the requests, and there was a lot of uncertainty by the development community. So, none of the conversation is new. It was sort of like, how do we get to a place where we can put in place some of the items that we discussed in the poverty action plan? And this was a mechanism to get there.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about the $400 million bond initiative and what that's going to be able to do?
So, we're looking at a lot of things. As you'll know, there's 10 districts, and there's different priorities. And, in some of the protests, looting, some of the things that we saw during COVID and during the protests is there was really a call to support neighborhood-based businesses, neighborhood-based businesses of color. And so really what we wanted to do was create a mechanism to generate the bond and the funding, and then really engage council and our stakeholders on the ground, whether it's the Chamber's Restart program, to some of the requests by our commercial corridor partners is sort of like, we want to prioritize the money to help support those businesses and the job creation that we need, in a COVID world. And so you're going to see this investment be very targeted to deal with some of the issues of equity. Council, as you know, passed this the call for a Black stimulus. I look at this as a combination of housing preservation, helping people out of poverty, and helping in a very targeted way our minority and community-based businesses.
I was doing a little digging and I couldn't find anything specific, but is this the biggest investment the city has made in housing in your tenure, or maybe even over the last 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, I think outside of NTI, that was a similar number. This would be the biggest one-time at one-time investment that we would see targeted at neighborhoods, right? Outside of NTI, this would be the next biggest thing. So
I guess what's going to happen is that to borrow money, it's about referendum in an upcoming election, and voters will vote on it. Usually they pass. How long is it, do you think, between now and then the implementation, the beginning of this kind of program, and then the fruition of it?
So we don't, my understanding is we don't need a ballot initiative for this. What we need is the ability to show we can fund it for the purposes of the market. As you know, the borrowing right now is some of the cheapest between some of the federal COVID relief and just the market. It's the cheapest money. So the ability to pass a tax that will guarantee the payment of the bond is what's going to help us expedite this. So our hope is that we will get this done over the next 6 months.
Okay.
From beginning to end, we'll have the hearings, pass the tax, initiate the tax,
and then do the bond deal.
Yeah, that's pretty quick and needed. In terms of the actual, we bring the money in and we start using the money, we start building things. What do you think is the likely economic impact of this whole program? Not just the actual housing and all that, but long term.
Yeah, and the president's office could get you some of this
Okay.
data, because some of the stuff we're looking to do, we spent, I think it was like $10 million in Philly First program, and then we saw $140 million in first-time home purchasing, and we recouped most of the money through the real estate transfer tax. So the council president's office has 4 or 5 really key examples of when we invested, how we generated the money back. And we believe that particularly now with COVID, that gets amplified if the investments continue to be that strategic.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll get Herb Wetzel to get you some of the data points that we're using that were developed in consultation with eConsult about what are some of the key markets that we want to support, and what are some of the investments and the return on investments that we can see very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question here, and you might think to yourself, we just did this. Why are you asking me this question? This is a huge investment and a huge program and much needed, but the city still needs a lot more help and a lot more things we can do. As we go forward, can we expect more programs, more ideas related to jobs and other major economic concerns?
I think the important thing is that, yes, government is going to have to continue to invest to build confidence in the market. We have to have a smart restart. We have to invest in people to transfer people from job sectors to what the opportunities are going to be opening up. You'll see the South Philly refinery and the Hillco development, which is going to be a logistics hub with the potential to create 30,000 jobs. We got to make sure that we're doing the connecting to some of this. And so I think the difference between this money and what we've done in the past is we're going to be more strategic. We're going to be smarter. We're going to evaluate what we're doing. We just completed, the poverty action plan process where we brought in subject experts and we said, we have to help landlords, right? Who are in the private sector in the affordable market, and we want to provide support, right? We have a lot of rental assist. We got to make sure that we help landlords who are helping us through this rental assist and through this COVID health crisis, right? So I think what you're going to see is more of this, but you're going to see our ability to show the return on investment on this so that people understand that building confidence in the market, that the government has to play a role in that so that the private market feels confident in their ability to continue and invest and make strategic investments in a smarter restart, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, we're dealing with this horrendous crisis, so this might seem like an odd question, but do you see opportunities coming out of this? Yes,
so I'll give you an example, particularly the restaurant and hospitality industry, right? Cozy restaurants can't exist downtown anymore, right? COVID, those are opportunities for those restaurants, for those of us in districts that border downtown. Look at you can move, right, to South Kensington, for instance, have more space, be COVID appropriate, but still, have your business, right? So it's an opportunity for us to have downtown businesses look at neighborhood businesses as opportunities and opportunities to relocate. So yes, I do think with this comes some opportunities if we're strategic in creating those opportunities.
And just one last thing, can you tell me a little bit more about the Black stimulus and how you see that playing out?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that the protesters said very clearly to us was that we couldn't go back to normal, right? And that's why council moved forward on what they call the new normal, what we call the new normal. And I think what we want to do is ensure that not only are we holding the private sector to more equitable standards, right, in their hiring practices, in their contracting practices. But as government, we're also going to do that, and we're going to invest. We all know that part of the challenge has been the historical disparities around investments in Black-owned firms and businesses of color. So we have to create those opportunities and facilitate those so that we can deal with those disparities, right, as we hold the private sector accountable. But, you know, we can't ask the private sector to do what we're not willing to do ourselves and demonstrate that we're willing to do. And the commercial corridors and our current investment in the commercial corridors is a way that we can demonstrate that we're going to change our policies and be more intentional and more focused.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else we should talk about? Anything else you want to bring up?
I think the key thing is, you know, diverse mixed income neighborhoods don't just happen. We have to make them happen. And as we move to recovery, we have to start showing, and government is a part of this, right, as the private sector is, we have to start having a broader vision about what a smarter recovery looks like. And so that, you know, and for that, you have to be big and you have to be bold.
Yeah. We'd like to thank Councilmember Maria Quiñones-Sanchez for being with us here on WPPM 106.5. I'd just like to mention the set of policies that we discussed there build on the new Normal Budget Act that City Council passed last June, which at the time allocated about $25 million in funds to address the issues of health disparities, poverty access, access to food, education, jobs, housing, and police accountability through this very broad set of policy goals, which had been outlined in the Poverty Action Plan. At the time, Council President Darrell Clark described the modest sum of $25 million, a relatively modest sum of $25 million as a down payment. And now I think what we're seeing here is the next step of what that investment looks like. And just so people know, the Poverty Action Plan was issued in or released in February, I think it was February of 2020, after months of hearings aimed at developing ideas and best practices to lift 100,000 Philadelphians out of poverty in the next 5 years. Amongst the key issues mentioned in the report, developing affordable housing was a major concern. And if you've been following our program and what's been going at City Council, you've seen a lot of legislation directed at keeping people in their homes, their apartments, being able to help people who are having trouble, helping make changes to landlord-tenant court, helping people get representation if they find themselves in landlord-tenant court. So a lot of different things to keep people in their houses, which is one of the most pressing needs right now. It was a pressing need before we even got to the pandemic, but now it's even more significant. And I think one of the major issues we're going to be seeing as we start to come out of the pandemic, which is hopefully as soon as possible, are the resolutions of landlord-tenant issues that have sort of been put to the side because of some of these protections. So there are a lot of things that are still that need to happen, and still a lot of things that need to be resolved. But this this set of policies, $400 million for affordable housing and other things, is a major step. And the city's taking advantage of a situation quite correctly, where they're borrowing money when the interest rates are so low. And I think that's probably one of the best things the city could be doing right now, because it lets them fund some of these programs that they want to initiate, and create this and help stem the tide of this growing housing issue we've been seeing for a long time. So this is a very interesting development, and something we're going to be keeping an eye on as we go through the next few months, when we start to see hearings about this legislation and when it ultimately gets passed, which it sounds like is going to be very soon, probably in the spring session. So we're looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about as that comes, as we get closer to that date. Yesterday, Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson held a press conference outside City Hall, which urged voters to approve ballot question number 2, which you'll see on your ballot in a couple weeks when you go to the polls. Or if you've already voted by mail, you saw it on your ballot. This ballot question, if approved, would create the office of the Victim Advocate in Philadelphia, According to Councilmember Johnson, the Office of the Victim Advocate would provide a voice for victims and co-victims of all crimes, with the primary focus on gun violence. Here, Councilmember Johnson explains the potential composition of the office.
I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of individuals ask me that. And so the question is, how will our office work in partnership with the other victim advocate organizations that are out there? You have one in the district attorney's office. You have also other organizations that works in South Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, as well as Northwest Philadelphia. Our office will serve as a clearinghouse. So we will engage in coordinating, collaborating, and partnerships with the other victim services organizations that are across the city of Philadelphia. So we'll be the hub, that central organization, the central city agency that will work in partnership with the other organizations. So we won't be doing direct services. We'll be more so doing referrals. So let me give you an example. Even though you have organizations such as what the district attorney's office does and Northwest Victim Services, and we have one in South Philadelphia as well, but you have other organizations that do the same work, such as Mothers in Charge, such as the National Justice Homicide Alliance. So we will partner with other boots on the ground organizations. We will engage in training. We will engage in partnerships when we're doing outreach. And so I also would like to say, with the level of 400 homicides that we're seeing, we want the other groups to know there's enough work to go around. Because some people ask, well, you're going to be duplicating services. At the level of homicides that we're seeing right now, which I'm learning through this process, is that one homicide is amplified by 100, at least 100, right? Conservatively. So if you're talking about 400 homicides this year, we're talking about 4,000 people. And so we won't be duplicating services, but we'll collaborate and partner, but also be a support system for other organizations that want to go to the next level that may have just started based upon a person losing their loved one. So that's the broad vision that we're looking at right now. But we won't be doing direct services in terms of duplicating what other people are doing. But surely if someone come to us regarding referral and support, we will be supportive of their efforts.
Johnson said City Council was looking at 2021 as a potential start date for the office after the appointment of a director and an advisory board. Johnson also discussed the response he's received from the federal and state government in response to the violence epidemic facing the city.
Foremost, I penned a letter with members of City Council to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, because it's the federal government that regulates the trafficking of guns. In the city of Philadelphia, we got a minimum response in terms of the information that we asked. So we want an investigative report as to where the guns are coming from. We also work very closely with our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro's office, and most importantly, the state police. The state police and Josh Shapiro's office works hand in hand where they track where the illegal guns are coming from. And so that's where you would start at the state level. It's ironic that you asked that question because we know that we have an interagency meeting that's coming up to be looking at how do we do a better job of sharing the data, but also staying on top of tracking where the guns are coming from. Because I remember it was Maxine Waters that took the CIA to task. You remember that? Because they flooded the streets of America with crack cocaine. And so my constituents are asking me when I do go home, yeah, Councilman, we see you're out here addressing this issue of gun violence, but you talk about the young men who are carrying the guns and the type of support they need and what they are or aren't doing. But are we ever asking the question where the guns are coming from? Because we know, how do you say, no Uzis made in Point Breeze or Strawberry Mansion. And so that's a very, very valid question and something we're going to stay on top of.
According to Johnson's office, Philadelphia is on pace to have between 450 and 475 homicides this year, compared to 356 last year. If passed via referendum on November 3rd, a victim advocate would be appointed by the mayor and city council, and funding would be allocated at a later date.
Thanks so much for that, Larry, for both of those stories. Really awesome. You're listening to People Powered News from WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM, Philly Cam Community Radio. I'm Allison Durham, and we're excited to now introduce a radio colleague. So in collaboration with the Scrap Radio Project, People Powered News is excited to welcome now Matt Berg of WRGU 92.9 FM, part of Germantown Community Radio. Matt brings us a short collection of interviews by Christopher Cannito, highlighting the important work Germantown residents are doing to support their community during the pandemic. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Allison. Hi, Larry. Are my levels good? You can hear me, right?
Oh, yeah, you sound great.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me both, and hello to your audience as well. Yeah, I'm with WRGU. We're a licensee of the Germantown United Community Development Corporation in Germantown. We share our studio as part of Germantown Community Radio, 3 radio stations that are co-located and use the same facilities and tower. And there's a fourth 92.9 that broadcasts in South Philadelphia on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. But the rest of the week, that 92.9 frequency is broadcasting out of Germantown.
All right. Thank you so much for that info. So you brought us a clip today. Would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, we, as part of the Scrap Project, we decided to try to increase some of the localism of our content. And rather than producing more half-hour or usually hour-long interview programs, which are great, we decided to kind of do some short interview segments. And right now we're interspersing them with music programming Thursday and Friday mornings at 11 a.m. And so far we've had one correspondent out on the street, but we have about 3 other folks that are 3 or 4 really that are on tap to go out and do more interviewing in the neighborhood. Furthermore, there's a lot of experts out there, which are great, giving their opinions and sharing information. But I thought it was also important to get the voices of people on the street that hadn't necessarily decided they were otherwise interested in being on the radio, but to approach them in the setting where they are, whether they're shopping or just hanging out or whatever errands they might be running, to just get their feelings, how they're dealing with COVID, how they're dealing with some social justice issues and all the change that's happening or hopefully happening in our society. So, so far so good. We've gotten about a half a dozen interviews, and I think you'll hear excerpts from 4 of them. And these are excerpts that are pretty short, but the full-length interviews run, say, 5 to 15 minutes.
All right. Well, fantastic. And when we come out of the interviews, I'm sure you can tell us how folks can get connected and also find out more about the station. So we're going to run this clip right now. Again, this is People Powered News from WPPM LP Philadelphia.
My name is Nick Freeman. I've lived in Mount Airy since 2014, so just 6 years now. My wife and I, we started this, our nonprofit. It's called Mount Airy Groceries. We're located on 6620 Germantown Avenue. And what caused us to start this was really COVID. It was really a direct response to COVID. A lot of people were having a hard time getting food, that all of a sudden everybody wanted to have everything delivered. People didn't want to go out to the stores. In those first couple of weeks of COVID, we didn't want to go out to the store and put ourselves at risk. And so George was already going, shopping at, sort of like food wholesalers. So we asked them to buy some food for us, and then we asked our neighbors. We put it up on Nextdoor and other social media outlets, like who else who wants some of this food that we're buying. And the response was so huge and overwhelming that it just kind of took off. And then we suddenly realized, I think Jess kind of proposed to people, hey, if you want to give us a little extra to give to George, since he's the one doing the shopping for us. And then people started making those donations. George didn't want the money. He said, hey, just keep it. We'll keep it for the venture. And then we got involved with Rachel Falco at Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network. She reached out to us and was saying, well, if you have extra food, we could take some, because they serve a lot of, people that are at risk and in need in our community. And so we started building grocery boxes for them. And the way we would do it when we first started up was we kind of set ourselves up where every box that we sold, we were able to donate an additional box to
one for one.
Exactly.
That's really impactful.
It was 1 for 1. Now we've kind of gotten away from that because We're just not selling as many boxes right now because people kind of got tired of. I think it's like a combination of things where people got tired of just sitting in their house and they just wanted to go shopping again.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot more donations now versus sales. Our business has kind of changed. We've worked with a couple of different nonprofit groups. The Working Womenist Collective was one group that we had worked with for a while. We had done some. We delivered some grocery boxes for Green Street Friends School for a few weeks there while they had some funding. So yeah, we've just been plugging right along. Now we're working with Erica Stewart. She also has her own nonprofit, and she shares our space here, and we've done some events with her, and it's been constantly evolving and changing, but we're continuing to work and see how we can serve the community here, and the next step will be to see if we can get some funding, we can get some grants to help us keep this going, to help and we have a lot of contact with people, and we're going to try to give another service that we can provide is to give those people a voice and allow them to talk about how they've been affected by everything that's been going on since COVID. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, COVID was enough, but then all this, we've had so much else going on in this country, politically and socially. There's, so much going on. So I think it's, a worthwhile endeavor to help give people a voice about how they're feeling about that and how they're impacted by it.
So I'm talking with Erica Stewart.
Yes.
And so can you tell me a little bit about the Social Impact Cafe?
So I have celebrated 15 years of working in direct care services.
Amazing.
And my specialty was working with people who need other people to live. Mm-hmm. Everyone doesn't come in the world with the same blessings of all five senses and all things that work. Mm-hmm. So I took on that career path to work with those individuals and their families. And at the 15-year mark, I wanted to see what was left for me to do. And that was to invest in my education, to learn about social entrepreneurship, and to understand how you grow a business off of helping people. Mm-hmm. And at this moment, there is more work and effort put in than we have financial revenue. We do more work and service in the community and for individuals than we do bring in money. And I'm proud to say that, but this is actually the pivoting point for what the next 10 years will look like. So after that 15-year point, the next 5 years was all education, all community building, mm-hmm. all networking. And we've had projects that the Social Impact Cafe takes pride in. We spearheaded a project with State Representative Christopher last May, which was a celebration of Brown versus the Board of Education. And we went into a school in Mount Airy, F.S. Edmonds Elementary School, which is my first school, and we revamped their entire library. And that project I took a lot of pride in, but I also looked at it as a pilot and a pivoting point for the work that needs to be done as we come into different neighborhoods, Mount Airy, Germantown, Chestnut Hill, West Oak Lane, that all young people deserve a certain quality of education and an environment to work in and be productive in.
Wonderful. So you've been in this game for quite a while.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing that. What brought you into this work in the first place, if you're comfortable sharing?
So being an only child and coming from a single parent household, there was a lot of time for wandering and wondering. So when you put those two together, that's a great space for a young person to learn. But at the age of 14, I began to take care of myself. My mother physically, emotionally wasn't able to do so, even though she had a full-time job. Mm-hmm. She lives with alcohol abuse and addiction, and she lives with some mental health and behavioral health challenges. And it took for me to work in these different spaces in those 15 years to continue to love my mother and have grace for her. But I also want to be a role model in everything that I do. So this turning point was really how to become a survivor, a victim to a survivor, and a survivor to a warrior. And now I am a protector. So there are levels and layers to this. And I want to be the first to stand on the top of the mountain and tell people like how good God is in my life and what he did for me. he can do for other people, but also being able to separate my religion and spirituality with basic knowledge that everyone deserves shelter, hygiene, inspiration is a running theme, because that's really right now the only way that I can interact when I'm serving and being a steward to my community.
Thank you so much. I love to hear that, and it's amazing. From my experience as a social worker, the best people, the most impactful folks I worked with are folks with lived experiences, and they're turning it. And it's not everyone's duty to do that, but you show how much you can connect in such a much more intimate way than folks that just have the clinical class experience. So thank you for sharing that.
Appreciate that.
You said you've been doing this work before COVID.
Correct.
And so when you're talking about shelter, you're talking about well-being, cleanliness. These have been historic issues, especially within Philadelphia, well before COVID. How have you seen the pandemic affect your work?
It definitely was a call to action and a rise to an occasion that began to coexist, because there are 1.6 million people that live here in Philly, but of those, 122,000 of them are young people living in poverty. So one of my speaking points when we go on live with the young people and call our neighbors out to come get fruits and veggies for free is that I speak about that poverty looks different from the left of us on Germantown Avenue working towards Chestnut Hill than it does when we look to the right of us looking towards Upsall. And being a person who grew up in this neighborhood, I feel comfortable enough to say those things and to speak out in reference to that there are 5 zip codes here in Philadelphia where there are identified young people that have experienced 4 more traumatic experiences. I personally have experienced 9 out of the 10. And I believe I'm an amazing person. I believe I'm a great attribute to my community. And when young people see those 2 qualities in itself, you can harness so much potential within them as you just listen to where their goals are and their dreams are.
I'm more of a person who tried to keep the community safe, clean, and try to bring the young ones together, because the young ones need the love that we more than anybody. Without showing them the love and giving them the leadership, then they will always be lost. I've been around for like 14 years. Well, I've seen some changes, but it's not just Germantown alone. It's all over. Changes have to be all over, because if you don't do it all over, then it's just going to be spot here, spot there. You got to do everything, because you can't clean clothes on one spot and say, okay, it's clean. Okay, so you have to literally wash down everything. I used to work in the with the recreation center, and the kids didn't know anything about sports. Didn't know about things that I grew up with, playing tops or whatever. So I told them, get off the computer, and I'm gonna bring you into my world. So I had done that. Showing them how to use their playing basketball, use their body, playing tops, the whole 9 yards. So one day, a parent walked up to me and said, how you doing, Jim? I'm like, who are you? They said, we heard about you. I said, my sons talk about you all the time. And I love kids. I feel that kids deserve that attention.
I'm Mary Kalina. We're here every weekday. We started on June 2nd.
Wow.
And this is our 17th week of continuous action. We're here Monday through Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. With the message of Black Lives Matter. The name of our vigil is actually called Standing in Solidarity for Racial Justice. And that our message is that we support Black Lives Matter.
Wow. And so are you guys from the local area? Are you guys connected to this church?
Yeah, it's actually a project that was initiated and is coordinated by the church. But from the beginning, we opened it up to the community. So our neighbors and just people who hear about it have been coming. So some church folks and some people from other religious groups and people just who live in the area, or even people come from, a distance sometimes to be with us.
Wow. And could you explain a little bit, but like, what's it been like doing that day in and day out? Because I know, could you, for folks that are listening, where are we exactly?
Oh yes, we're on Lincoln Drive. It's Lincoln Drive, right between like Johnson and Porter. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of on the edge of Germantown and Mount Airy. Yeah. It's a really busy road. You can hear the honking in the background. So we're here at rush hour because we want people to see the message of Black Lives Matter. And it's been really great. I mean, we started it because we felt like we had to do something visible. It started very shortly after the murder of George Floyd and all the protests started. And we had a church town meeting virtually. And my contribution was that I felt like we needed to do something visible to show, where we stood and show our support for Black Lives Matter and to show our opposition to what was going on, in terms of the lack of police accountability and the violence. So it was just myself and another woman from the church started on June 2nd. We just went out with our homemade signs and just stood there. And then at the end, we kind of looked at each other and said, well, I guess we'll be back tomorrow. And it just kind of went from there. And so we've been here every single day, except when we had the heat advisories a couple of days because it's dangerous. And a couple of national holidays because there's no rush hour.
Yeah.
So we need a break.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing that collection of interviews from WRGU. Would you care to, tell listeners exactly who collected those interviews and where folks can connect with WRGU?
Sure. That was Chris Cannito. He's a grad student at the Center for Social Policy and has a social work background, which I think is really interesting to the style of interviews that he does. We're talking to some other people that are communication students. If you are interested in working in the Germantown area on this project, my email is radio@germantownunitedcdc.org, and that's CDC as in Community Development Corporation. You can also go to the germantownunitedcdc.org website, where you can link back to information about our radio station, as well as the mission of Germantown United CDC. I just want to add that the George that was mentioned in the first interview is the proprietor of the Melania Cafe, where the Mount Airy Groceries kind of was started out, I think, working in a little pocket park right next door to their building, and he was helping them obtain groceries. And the church on Lincoln Drive is the Unitarian Church, which is right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, that series of clips is really awesome in kind of illustrating that even in a small community, even in these sort of times where we all feel distant, people are active and out, making sure that this work continues, or, taking a look at their community and saying, whoa, we have a need. And, despite all barriers, making it happen. So it's very inspiring.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Allison. Also going to add that just in terms of radio production, and as COVID is rearing its ugly head once again, many of our interviews may be conducted outdoors. And so there's some background noise, and I just decided not to worry about that. In fact, I think the car horns honking were kind of a little bit of a radio verite, if you will, in terms of immersing listeners in the experience that people are having.
Yeah, well, you know what? Like I say, we're doing the best we can. This is community radio, and so if we get some environmental noise, then that's just part of the package.
Allison, it's community radio is a phrase that, yes, has escaped my lips many times too.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. And for listeners just tuning in, this has been Matt Berg of WRGU 92.9 FM, Germantown Community Radio, sharing a very special piece with us, a series of interviews collected in and around Germantown with residents doing great work despite challenges and sort of in the face of COVID-19. hope to see you again, Matt, or hope to have you on the show. We're not so much seeing you right now, but it's great to hear you.
Right. Allison, thank you so much, and Larry for having me.
All right, take care. All right, right now, before we close out the show, I want to let listeners know that we are in the midst, or actually just beginning, a very exciting time here at PhillyCam and WPPM 106.5 FM. Yesterday marked the first day of People Power Media Fest, which is a 4-week-long celebration of our PhillyCam members, our production on PhillyCam TV, and production on WPPM radio. So I want to let folks know what they can expect. We're going to run this clip and come right back to bring Larry in and bid you adieu. Gee. Philadelphia, get ready for PhillyCam's People Power Media Fest. We're celebrating our commitment to representation, access, and literacy Monday, October 19th to Friday, November 20th, 2020. Join us to mark Free Speech Week, PhillyCam and WPPM's anniversaries, Media Literacy Week, Election Day, and so much more. PhillyCam will present 4 weeks of community programming featuring special workshops, panel discussions, and virtual events on PhillyCam's television channels, radio station, and social. Tune in on Comcast 66, 966, and Verizon 2930, WPPM 106.5 FM, and online. At PhillyCam, we believe media should reflect and represent our community. We all have the right to critically analyze and participate in media, and with access to media tools, we can build power and envision an equitable world. It's People Power Media Fest with PhillyCam, October 19th to November 20th, 2020. For the schedule and more information, visit phillycam.org. All right. So much to look forward to in the next few weeks here at PhillyCam, including special election programming. Larry, you participated in a wonderful special today with Hall Monitor at noon to 1, Tuesdays, Thursdays. People can expect election programming covering topics and issues related to what's going to happen November 3rd.
Yeah, we had a great discussion this morning with Denise Clay, who's, I think, one of the best journalists in the city. So to have her come on and talk about local and national elections was great. Great discussion, and we're going to be doing a lot more this week. We have Hall Monitor tomorrow night. We're going to be doing a pre-debate show, post-debate show, and then next week we have a whole lot of things we're planning. I don't want to get too far ahead yet. And then that leads up to election night, which really isn't election night this year. I think we're talking about election week.
Yes.
Just the way that it looks like ballots are being processed and things like that. We're probably not going to know on election night. It's probably going to be more like a week, maybe longer in some states. But it's going to be very interesting, and we're going to be here to walk everybody through it and help everybody understand it.
Very true. All right. So thank you so much, Matt, again, Matt Berg, for that special contribution. Thanks, Larry. This has been People Powered News on WPPM LP Philadelphia 106.5 FM, PhillyCam Community Radio. I'm Allison Durham.
And I'm Larry McGlynn. If you'd like to connect with us, share comments and questions, email radio@phillycam.org. Follow us on Facebook at WPPM-FM, and be sure to visit our news blog at wppm.news for extended interviews and additional updates.
All right. We'll see everyone next week.